It's 3 in the morning. You're asleep. Your phone is charging on the nightstand, and somewhere across the world, a missile just left its silo. You have exactly 14 minutes before everything changes forever. But here's the thing nobody tells you. If World War III kicks off tomorrow, most people have absolutely no idea who gets hit first. They think it's random. They think it's wherever the politicians are. They think major cities like New York or Los Angeles would be the obvious targets. But military strategists have been running these simulations for decades. And the actual answer is way more terrifying than you'd ever expect. If you're the kind of person who likes knowing things before everyone else, if you want to understand the world in ways most people never will, then do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Click the notification bell, because we dive deep into topics like this every single week. The kind of stuff that keeps you up at night. The stuff your teachers never covered.
9, 8,
Trust me,
7, 6,
you don't
5,
want to miss
4,
what's coming
3,
next.
2, 1. Launch
Alright,
confirmed.
let me set the stage here. Because to understand who gets targeted first, you need to understand how nuclear strategy actually works. See, when most people imagine World War III, they picture chaos. Random explosions. Cities picked at random, like some kind of apocalyptic lottery. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Modern nuclear warfare is calculated down to the second. Every target is pre-selected. Every warhead has an assignment. And the order in which things get hit follows a very specific logic. A logic that most civilians have never even thought about. A logic that, once you understand it, changes how you see the world around you. The doctrine is called counterforce versus countervalue. Counterforce means hitting military targets first: missile silos, command centers, nuclear submarines, bomber bases. The goal is to eliminate the enemy's ability to strike back. Countervalue means hitting population centers, cities, economic hubs, the stuff that hurts morale and breaks a nation's will to fight. For decades, the debate has raged about which strategy makes more sense. But here's the reality. In the opening minutes of World War III, counterforce comes first. And that means the first places to get hit aren't the cities you're thinking of. Let me give you a real example. You ever heard of a place called Minot, North Dakota? Probably not. It's got about 45,000 people. It's cold, it's quiet. Most Americans couldn't find it on a map. But Minot sits right next to Minot Air Force Base, which happens to house a significant portion of America's nuclear arsenal. B-52 bombers loaded with cruise missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles buried in silos across the surrounding prairie. If Russia launches a first strike, Minot isn't just on the list. Minot is near the top. The same goes for places like Malmstrom in Montana, Warren in Wyoming. Bases you've never heard of that are absolutely critical to nuclear deterrence. These quiet, rural communities are essentially ground zero. The people living there go about their daily lives, sending kids to school, going to work, never fully realizing they're sitting on one of the most valuable targets on the entire planet. Now here's where it gets even crazier. Those silos I mentioned, they're not just sitting under the bases. They're spread out across thousands of square miles of empty farmland. This is intentional. It's called dispersal. The idea is that an enemy would have to use multiple warheads just to take out our land-based missiles. So if you're a farmer in rural Montana, living 100 miles from the nearest major city, you might think you're safe. But you're not. Because there could be a missile silo 3 miles from your property. And that silo has a target painted on it. Some estimates suggest that the Great Plains region contains over 400 nuclear missile silos, 400 individual targets scattered across America's heartland. But hold on, I haven't even gotten to the scary part yet. See, There's a concept in nuclear warfare called launch on warning, and it completely changes the equation. Launch on warning means that if early detection systems spot incoming missiles, the targeted nation doesn't wait for impact. They launch their own missiles immediately, before the enemy warheads even land. This is why timing matters so much. Whoever strikes first has a massive advantage, because they might catch the other side with their missiles still in the silos. But if both sides are on high alert, you end up with missiles passing each other in the sky. Thousands of warheads heading in opposite directions. And within the first hour of World War III, most of the damage is already done. Think about that. 1 hour. Less time than it takes to watch a movie. And civilization as we know it could be effectively over. So let's talk specifics. If Russia decided to launch tomorrow, what would they target first? Intelligence analysts have studied this for years. The primary targets would be command and control centers. That means places like Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, Nareda, the Pentagon, Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, which houses Stiracham, the nerve center of America's nuclear operations. These are the brains of the military. Take them out, and decision-making becomes chaos. Generals can't communicate. Orders can't be verified. The whole system starts falling apart. The chain of command depends on communication. Without it, nobody knows who's in charge. Nobody knows what orders are legitimate. The fog of war becomes impenetrable. Next up would be the nuclear triad. That's the three-legged system of ICBMs, submarine-launched missiles, and bomber aircraft. Russia would try to hit as many silos as possible before the missiles launch. They'd target bomber bases to destroy planes on the ground. They'd hunt for nuclear submarines, though that's incredibly difficult since subs are designed to disappear beneath hundreds of feet of ocean water. This is exactly why submarines are considered the ultimate insurance policy. You can't hit what you can't find. And America's Ohio-class submarines, each carrying enough nuclear firepower to devastate an entire nation, are virtually undetectable when they're on patrol. They could be anywhere, and that uncertainty is what keeps the enemy guessing. But here's where things take a dark turn. After the military targets come the population centers, and when I say population centers, I'm not just talking about New York and LA. Any city with strategic value becomes fair game. Washington, D.C., obviously. That's both a political target and a symbolic one. Destroying the capital sends a message to the entire world. But also think about ports. Norfolk, Virginia, home of the Atlantic Fleet. San Diego, California, major Pacific naval hub. Seattle, with its shipyards and Boeing facilities. Houston, with its petrochemical refineries. These cities aren't just big. They're militarily significant. They produce things. They move things. They power the war machine. And then there are the industrial targets. Factories that produce weapons. Refineries that process fuel. Transportation hubs that move supplies. In total war, everything becomes a target eventually. The goal is complete destruction of the enemy's capacity to fight. And in a nuclear exchange, that destruction happens in hours, not years. Think about World War II. It took years of sustained bombing to significantly damage Germany's industrial capacity. With nuclear weapons, you could achieve the same result in an afternoon. That's the terrifying efficiency we're dealing with. Now let me flip the script for a second. What if America strikes first? What happens to Russia? The same logic applies, just in reverse. We'd target their missile silos scattered across Siberia, their submarine bases in the Arctic, places like Severomorsk and Gadjayevo, their command bunkers buried deep underground near Moscow, protected by hundreds of feet of rock and concrete. And here's something wild that most people don't know. Russia has a system called perimeter. You might know it by its nickname, the dead hand. It's designed to automatically launch a retaliatory strike if Russian leadership is wiped out. Even if every single Russian general is killed, even if the Kremlin is reduced to radioactive rubble, the dead hand can trigger the missiles without any human input. Sensors detect the attack, algorithms determine that leadership is gone, and the system launches everything. It's the ultimate insurance policy, and it's absolutely terrifying. But wait, we've been talking about Russia and America like they're the only players in this game. They're not. Not even close. If World War III starts tomorrow, it's not just a two-player game. China has nuclear weapons, a lot of them, and their arsenal is growing faster than anyone predicted. Some estimates suggest China could have over 1,000 nuclear warheads by the end of this decade. North Korea has nuclear weapons and increasingly sophisticated delivery systems. Pakistan and India have nuclear weapons, and they've come dangerously close to using them against each other multiple times. Israel almost certainly has nuclear weapons, though they've never officially confirmed it. That's called nuclear ambiguity, and it's intentional. And then there are the NATO allies, Britain and France, both nuclear armed, both bound by alliance treaties that would drag them into any major conflict. Let's say China decides to make a move during the chaos. Taiwan becomes ground zero. But America has defense commitments to Taiwan, so now U.S. forces are engaged in the Pacific. Japan gets drawn in because American bases on Japanese soil make them a target. South Korea gets drawn in because regional stability collapses. Australia gets drawn in through a UK-US agreements. The entire Indo-Pacific region becomes a war zone. And suddenly, we're not just talking about nuclear missiles. We're talking about conventional warfare on a massive scale. Naval battles in the South China Sea, air combat over the Taiwan Strait, amphibious assaults on contested islands, ground troops clashing on beaches. It would be the largest military operation since World War II. Except this time both sides have nuclear weapons. And here's where the dominoes really start falling in ways nobody can control. Russia sees America distracted in the Pacific. This is their window of opportunity. They push into Eastern Europe. The Baltic states become the target. Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, all NATO members, all bound by Article 5. An attack on one is an attack on all. So now NATO is fully at war with Russia. European cities become targets. American bases in Germany, Italy, Spain, Turkey, all of them in the crosshairs. Suddenly you've got a two-front war. Pacific and Atlantic, East and West. The nightmare scenario that military planners have dreaded for decades. At this point, the situation is spiraling completely out of control. Multiple fronts, multiple nuclear-armed nations, alliances pulling countries into conflicts they never wanted, and the pressure to use nuclear weapons grows by the hour. Because here's the terrifying calculus that every military strategist understands. If you're losing a conventional war, and you have nuclear weapons, the temptation to use them becomes overwhelming. It's called escalation dominance. You use a small tactical nuclear weapon to destroy an enemy military formation. The enemy responds with their own tactical nuclear weapon, back and forth, each strike bigger than the last, until someone crosses the threshold to strategic weapons, city killers. And then it's over. This is the reason most military experts believe that any major war between great powers would eventually go nuclear. Not because anyone wants it, not because anyone plans for it, but because the logic of war pushes you there. When you're losing, when your nation's survival is at stake, every option stays on the table. That's the terrible truth nobody wants to admit. So who actually gets hit first in the opening moments? Let me paint the picture in sequence. The opening salvo wouldn't be nuclear, at least not immediately. First would come cyber attacks. Power grids going down across entire regions. Financial systems collapsing. ATMs not working. Banks offline. Communications disrupted. Cell towers dark. Internet connections severed. This is the invisible war. The one that's already happening in small doses today. Russia has probed American infrastructure for years. China has infiltrated networks across government and industry. These capabilities would be deployed first to blind and confuse. You'd wake up one morning and nothing would work, and you might not even know a war had started. Then comes the conventional strikes. Cruise missiles hitting air defense systems. Ships launching attacks on enemy fleets in contested waters. Aircraft engaging in dogfights at 30,000 feet. Submarine warfare in the depths. This phase might last hours. It might last days. Each side probing the other's defenses, looking for weaknesses, trying to establish dominance. But at some point, someone crosses the line. Maybe a tactical nuclear weapon gets used on a battlefield to stop an advancing army. Maybe a missile accidentally hits the wrong target and kills thousands of civilians. Maybe a leader under pressure makes a desperate decision, and then everything changes. The nuclear phase begins with counterforce strikes. Missile silos targeted first. Command centers destroyed. Military bases turned to glass. The places I mentioned earlier, Minot, Cheyenne Mountain, Offutt, all hit within minutes of each other. Then it expands to countervalue targets. Cities, ports, industrial centers, millions of people, gone in flashes of light so bright they're visible from space. The world as we know it starts to end. And all of this happens so fast that by the time you hear about it on the news, it's already too late. But here's the thing that haunts me most when I think about this. We're not even talking about the aftermath. The immediate destruction is horrific enough, but what comes next might be worse. Nuclear winter. The scientific models show that even a limited nuclear exchange, just between India and Pakistan, could throw enough soot into the atmosphere to cause global crop failures for years. A full-scale war between Russia and America. The skies would darken. Temperatures would drop by several degrees across the entire planet. Agriculture would collapse. Supply chains would evaporate. Billions of people who survived the initial blasts would face starvation, disease, violence as societies break down. The survivors of the nuclear war might actually envy the dead. That's not hyperbole. That's what the scientists tell us. And yet, despite all this, the missiles are still aimed. The submarines are still patrolling cold waters. The bombers are still on standby. The bunkers are still manned. Every single day, we live with the reality that this could happen. Not because anyone wants it, but because the systems are in place. The weapons exist. The tensions simmer. And humans make mistakes. One misread radar signal. One political miscalculation. One leader who feels cornered. That's all it takes. Now you might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. It's not to scare you. Well, maybe a little. Fear is healthy when it motivates awareness. But mostly it's because understanding this reality is the first step toward preventing it. See, nuclear war doesn't happen because of some inevitable fate written in the stars. It happens because of decisions. Human decisions. Political decisions. Choices made by leaders who either understand the stakes or don't. And as citizens in democratic societies, we have a role to play in who those leaders are. What policies they pursue, how they think about conflict and diplomacy. The Cold War taught us that deterrence can work. For 50 years, the US and Soviet Union pointed weapons at each other. Enough weapons to destroy the world many times over. And somehow, through skill and luck and careful diplomacy, we avoided catastrophe. Leaders talked, even when they hated each other. Hotlines were established. Arms control treaties were signed. The logic of mutual assured destruction, as terrifying as it was, prevented either side from pushing the button. But deterrence isn't foolproof. There were close calls. So many close calls. 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we came closer to nuclear war than most people realize. 1983, Stanislav Petrov, the Soviet officer who single-handedly prevented nuclear war by correctly identifying a computer error as a false alarm when every protocol told him to report an American attack. 1995, when Russian radar mistook a Norwegian research rocket for an American submarine, launched missile, and President Yeltsin actually had the nuclear briefcase open in front of him. Every single time, we got lucky. A cool head here. A technical glitch there. Fate intervening at the last second. How long does luck last? The world today is arguably more dangerous than the Cold War ever was. Back then, it was two superpowers, face to face, each understanding the other. A terrible stability. Now it's multiple nuclear states with different ideologies, different alliances, different red lines, different levels of communication. China is rising. Russia feels cornered. North Korea is unpredictable. Regional powers are pursuing their own nuclear ambitions. The chance for miscalculation has multiplied, and the systems designed to prevent escalation are showing cracks. Arms control treaties are expiring or being abandoned. Communication channels are deteriorating. Trust is eroding. So what can we actually do? Not as governments, but as regular people trying to make sense of a terrifying world. First, stay informed. Not in a paranoid, obsessive way that consumes your life, but in an educated way that helps you understand what's happening. Know where the flashpoints are. Taiwan, Ukraine, the Baltic states, the Korean Peninsula, Kashmir. These are the places where World War III could start. Watch the news, read analysis, understand the dynamics at play. Second, support arms control and diplomacy. Treaties like New START, which limit nuclear arsenals, exist for a reason. They create transparency between adversaries. They reduce the chance of surprise attacks. They build habits of communication. When these treaties collapse, the world becomes more dangerous. Pay attention to which leaders support them and which ones abandon them. Make your voice heard on these issues. Third, and this might sound strange, but have a plan. I'm not saying build a bunker in your backyard, but know where you'd go if something happened. Know what supplies you'd need. Think about it calmly, rationally, not in panic. Because if the worst ever happens, the people who survive will be the ones who thought ahead. Water, food, medicine, a meeting point for family. These are basic preparations that anyone can make. And finally, appreciate what we have right now. Every day that World War III doesn't happen is a gift. It's not guaranteed. It's not automatic. It's not something we can take for granted. It's the result of millions of choices, big and small, that pull us back from the edge. Diplomats negotiating in quiet rooms. Military officers showing restraint under pressure. Ordinary people demanding peace from their governments. None of this is inevitable. All of it requires effort. All of it requires vigilance. I started this video with a nightmare scenario. 3 in the morning. A missile launch. 14 minutes until impact. That's a real scenario that military planners game out constantly. It's been a real scenario since 1945, when the first atomic bomb was detonated. And yet, here we are, almost 80 years later, still standing, still hoping, still building a world where that nightmare never becomes reality. But the nightmare only stays a nightmare if we make sure it does. Alright, so we covered a lot today. The doctrine of first strikes. Counterforce versus countervalue targeting. The specific locations that would get hit first. Places like Minot, North Dakota, and Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. We talked about the dead hand system, where Russian missiles launch automatically even if their leadership is completely destroyed. We discussed how multiple nuclear powers change the calculus in terrifying ways, how a conflict over Taiwan could trigger a war across Europe, and we went through the phases of how World War III would actually unfold, from invisible cyber attacks to conventional warfare to nuclear escalation. Now I want to hear from you, and I mean really hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me this. If World War III started tomorrow, and you had 1 hour of warning, what would you do? Seriously, think about it. Where would you go? Who would you call first? What would matter to you in that moment? I read every single comment, and I genuinely want to know your answer. And if this video made you think, if it opened your eyes to something you hadn't considered before, then share it. Send it to a friend. Send it to that family member who loves history and geopolitics. Send it to anyone who needs to understand what's really at stake in our world. Because these are the conversations we need to be having. Not to spread fear, but to spread awareness. And if you made it this far, you're clearly someone who cares about understanding the world at a deeper level. Someone who doesn't shy away from hard truths. So why not join the crew? Hit subscribe. Click that notification bell so you never miss another video. Because we're going to keep exploring these topics. The stuff nobody else wants to talk about. The stuff that actually matters. Until next time, stay aware, stay prepared, and I'll see you in the next one.